every one of you, tourism management students. Welcome to TM Elective 3, which is Ecotourism. So for today's lesson, we are going to talk about the role of ethics in ecotourism. So this will be our first lesson this final term. So even before in your high school or early college days, you've talked about what is ethics. So now let us reiterate once again, what is ethics? So you can take down notes of the following statements that I'm going to say so you can have your own backup. So ethics is a system of moral principles. It is concerned of what is good for individuals and society. So more likely, pag sinabi nating ethics, it is being described as moral philosophy. Diba? Kung ano yung tama, kung ano yung mali sa isang tao or sa isang society. And if we are going to dig deeper, ethics comes from the Greek word ethos, which means habit, character, customs, or disposition. So in ethics, we have here three approaches. Okay? So three approaches to ethics. The first one is the virtue ethics. So when we say virtue ethics, it means how to live your life. What kind of person do I want to be? So in this kind of approach, we are finding the right balance between within the values, between and within the values. Ano ba yung values ng isang tao? Ano ba yung nananalaytay sa yung values? Ano ba yung dominant values na sa tingin mo is isinasabuhay mo? Another example of virtue ethics is that yung tanong natin na, is my behavior while traveling is consistent of being or with being a moral person? Pag ba tayo nagta-travel, do we think our behavior, do we think that our values and behavior while traveling is good? Is it bad? Tayo pa ba yun kapag nagta-travel tayo or nag-iibang klase na tayo or nag-iiba na yung behavior natin kapag nakakapunta tayo sa ibang lugar? Is it because masyado tayong na-excite? Is it because masyado tayong na-amaze sa isang bagay? The next one approach is the consequentialist ethics. Okay? So once again, it is consequentialist ethics. So dito naman tinatanong natin, is it good? Mabuti ba? Mabuti ba yung ginagawa natin? So the terms here are, or the questions here, what impact is my behavior having on the world? May impact ba yung behavior ko everyday? Yung ginagawa natin everyday, may something ba na impact or nakaka-apekto ba to sa takbo ng mundo? Am I doing more good or harm by my behavior? Diba? If we come to think of it, yung behavior ba natin sa araw-araw, nagkokos ba to ng kabutihan sa ibang tao or nagkokos ng harm? Is my behavior making the world a better place? Diba? Mapapatanong tayo ng mga ganong klase. So in here, in consensualist ethics or consequentialist ethics, actions aim at bringing about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Ibig sabihin, kung gagawa tayo ng isang bagay, we have to make sure that in this kind of approach, we are contributing something good. Diba? Something good para sa nakararaming mga tao sa paligid natin. For example, if we implement this kind of sustainable practices in the environment, di ba hindi lang naman yung environment yung magbe-benefit? Most likely, pati yung mga tao within the environment, yung mga nakatira doon, di ba? Yung host community. So in here, benevolence is a primary value. So ano ba pag sinabi nating benevolence? So it means kindness. Di ba? Alam naman natin that if we do some kind of things, di ba? Kung gagawa tayo ng isang klase ng bagay o gagawa tayo ng mga kung ano-ano, lahat ng yon is may consequence. Lahat ng yon is may kapalit. Now, in this kind of approach, sinasabi nga na we need to make something good. Greatest good for the greatest number of people. And if we do something good, it means we are being kind enough to the people around us, especially to the environment. And the third approach is the Deontological Ethics. Okay? So, in Deontological Ethics, tinatanong dito, is it right? Tama ba? Diba? So, in here, what are my ethical principles telling me I should do? Diba? In every kind of people or tayo as an individual, may kanya-kanya tayong ethical principles. May kanya-kanya tayong paniniwala kung ano yung tama, kung ano yung mali. So, in here, the principles are arriving at ethical principle through a reason. Ibig sabihin, nagka-come up ka sa isang principle or may pinangahawakan kang ethical principle because you have a reason. Bakit mo siya isinasabuhay, bakit ganito yung mga values mo, bakit ganito yung paniniwala mo sa certain things, and that reason must be consistent and coherent. So when we say coherent, it is logical, it is reasonable, makatarungan, it is rational. Okay? So those are the three kinds of approaches to ethics. We have the virtue ethics, again, the consequentialist ethics, and the deontological ethics. Okay, so let's move on. So researchers have sometime been instrumental in drawing attention to the various sociological or social, ecological, and economic impacts of tourism in many regions of the world. Those regions experiencing the most pressure from tourism have been most vociferous in expressing their disdain of the tourism industry presence. So alam naman nating lahat or way back before yung napag-aralan natin yung social, ecological, and economic impacts of tourism that a lot of things are happening around the world right now. Lalong-lalo na yung masyadong naapektuhan yung tourism industry because of the pandemic, because of the COVID-19. And some of the areas or some of the regions in the world or the countries, they cannot express, diba? They cannot express how disappointed they are, how sad they are na biglang nagkaroon ng travel ban, biglang nagkaroon ng paghinto sa pag-accept ng mga turista. Kumbaga, nalulungkot sila, nadidismaya sila sa part na yon, pero alam nila na merong mas mabuting rason kung bakit ginawa yon ng government. Okay? It's because, diba, to prevent the spread of the virus. So, kung yan man is social, kung yan man is ecological or economic impacts or issues, most likely, apektado lahat ng aspects sa ating mundo. Yung mga tao, yung environment, yung mga, let's say, mga wildlife animals, yung local community, even the tourists, yung mga businessman. So, kumbaga sinasabi natin dito, domino effect. So, this was never more frankly implied than in the following statement by the Hawaiian delegates of a tourism conference. Sinabi dito that we don't want tourism. We don't want you. We don't want to be degraded as servants and dancers. That is cultural prostitution. I don't want to see a single one of you in Hawaii. There are no innocent tourists. So ito yung kanilang naging statement during the Hawaiian Tourism Conference that one of the delegates, ayan, sinabi itong phrases na ito. So, alam naman natin that Hawaii is a beautiful state, di ba, sa Amerika. So, now let us elaborate further yung about sa Hawaii later on sa mga susunod na slides. So, although this is an example of social impact of tourism, more fundamentally, it is a socially oriented ethical issue. We call attention to issues of this nature because we understand that there has been an injustice to either someone or group of people. So, sinasabi natin dito that yung mga nangyari sa Hawaii is an example of social impact of tourism. Particularly or specifically, yung tinatawag nating socially oriented ethical issues. So, ano ba kasi sinasabi nating social ethics? So, meron tayong tatlong types ng mga ethical issues na na-encounter. The number one is the meta-ethics. Okay, so take note of this. When we say meta-ethics, we investigate where our ethical principles come from and what they mean. Ibig sabihin, saan ba nanggaling yung mga principles natin sa buhay? Saan ba nanggaling yung mga ethical principles natin? At ano yung ibig sabihin ng mga yun? May ibig sabihin ba yun o wala lang? Okay? So, dito sa meta-ethics, binibigyan natin ng emphasis yung universal truths at yung will of God. Okay? We believe that all things, di ba? Lahat ng yan is may rason. Lahat ng yan is may ibig sabihin. Lahat ng yan is may purpose. Number 2 is the normative ethics. So, ano naman yung normative ethics? This is more of a practical task. Ayan, moral standards that regulate right and wrong conduct. So, dito sinasabi, ano ba yung mga good habits na dapat nating i-acquire, na dapat nating i-practice? Ano ba yung mga duties na dapat natin gawin every day? And most likely, ano ba yung mga consequences ng mga behavior na ginagawa natin sa ibang tao? 'Di ba? For example, pag nagkalat ka, may consequence ba yun? May kapalit ba yun? Meron bang impact yun sa community, sa environment? So that is normative ethics. And the last one is the applied ethics. So, si applied ethics naman, in here, we are examining specific controversial issues. So, ano yung mga controversial issues na pinag-aaralan dito sa applied ethics? So, example niyan is yung abortion, diba? Yung animal rights, mga environmental concerns, yung mga topics about or issues about homosexuality, and so on. So, those are the three basic types of ethical issues or social ethical issues. We have the meta-ethics, the normative ethics, and applied ethics. And we all know that in our country, particularly here in the Philippines, we all know that there are lots of injustices, diba? Kumbaga hindi makatarungan, walang hustisya. It's either sa kapwa nating tao, it's either sa mga nangyayari sa paligid natin, 'di ba? Normally, yung mga nangyayaring mga crimes, mga issues nowadays, 'di ba? So, katulad lang din yan nung sa nature. Sabi diyan, we call attention to issues of this nature because we understand that there has been an injustice to either someone or group of people. At yung mga injustices na yan is dapat natin masolusyonan in order for us to come up with a more harmonious, diba? More sustainable tourism and environment. Ayan. So, as you can see in the picture, this is one of the highlights of Hawaii. So, as we all know, Hawaii is one of the states in the United States of America. Ayan. So, siya lang is yung nag-iisang state outside North America. And most likely, ito is a tropical island. Okay? So, tropics. And if we are going to search or dig deeper about Hawaii, so dito sa state na to, they have a great weather buong taon. So as mentioned a while ago, that there is a term about cultural prostitution. So as we all know, prostitution is the world's oldest profession. And when we say prostitution, it is somewhat the definition wherein a woman as an object of degraded and victimized sexual value for use and exchange through a medium of money. So alam naman natin na kapag prostitution ang pinag-uusapan, involve ang mga babae. And most likely, you are using itong mga babae na to in exchange for money. Okay? Ang kapalit is pera. And alam naman natin din na sa panahon ngayon, hindi talaga nawawala pa ang prostitution. Kumbaga, lagana pa rin siya. We don't know the real reason, or let's say, the deep reason, bakit ginagawa yon ng nakakaraming kababaihan. 'Di ba? Bakit nagagawa nila na gamitin yung kanilang katawan or bakit nagagawa ng ibang tao na gamitin itong mga kababaihan na to kapalit ng pera. So that is one of the cultural issues or social issues also in Hawaii. For example, Aboriginal people in Canada have started to come to realize the value of tourism industry as a vehicle for economic development in their communities where once they had been more skeptical. So alam naman natin na kahit saang bansa, hindi lang naman sa Canada, that the value of tourism is really important because hindi lang siya nag-a-act as as pangbungad ng isang bansa na ay itong bansa na to maraming magagandang destination dito, maraming mga magagandang lugar dito, but then tourism industry serves as a vehicle. It serves as a tool. It serves as a key for economic development. Para tumaas yung ekonomiya natin, para mas mag-develop, para mas maging stable. Especially para matulungan natin yung mga communities, matulungan natin yung mga nasa social hierarchy na mga families, diba? Yung mga nasa poverty line, nasa middle class, and most likely yung mga elite class, they also have their purpose. Kung halimbawa sila is may-ari ng isang hotel, sila is merong mga businesses such as travel agencies. So it means that lahat sila, they are contributing something for the development of our economy. And alam naman natin, tourism industry is one of the, let's say, service-oriented, diba? We are capital intensive, we are profit-oriented, but at the same time, we are service-oriented. So yes, mag-earn tayo ng money in return for the services na binibigay natin, but we need to make sure that the services we are offering, the services that we are giving to our tourists, to the travelers, is enough, di ba? Enough para sila is masatisfied, para sila is bumalik-balik sa destination na yon. At doon natin makikita, di ba? Kapag lumalago ang isang ekonomiya, ibig sabihin, pinapatronize ito ng nakararami. Ibig sabihin, etong mga turista na to, hindi naman nila babalikan yung Boracay kung wala naman silang something memorable, kung hindi naman sila na-satisfy sa mga services na in-avail nila before. So, in Canada or kahit saang bansa man yan, tourism industry acts as a vehicle, okay, for economic development. So, in many cases rather, their skepticism was founded upon the fact that they were not players within the industry and were therefore not realizing any of the potential economic benefits that accrue from the industry. So when we say skepticism, it is an attitude of doubt. Okay? It is a belief that some or all human knowledge is impossible. Example, ma'am, ng skepticism. Diba, we are into social media. O kaya naman is madalas tayong manood ng mga television. At pag tayo is nanood ng television, nanood tayo ng mga different channels na yan, maraming mga ads, maraming mga commercial. And we are skeptical when the television ad said, etong detergent na to, maaalis niya lahat ng dumi sa damit mo. Ibig sabihin, we are having doubts. Merong pagdududa, merong pag-aalinlangan na totoo ba? Itong detergent na to, mabubura lahat ng dumi sa damit ko? Or let's say, sasabihin, it's more fun in the Philippines. Totoo ba? It's more fun in the Philippines? Mas masayang bumisita sa Pilipinas kahit na ang daming mga crimes? Kahit na ang daming mga kaguluhan. So when we say skepticism, it is an attitude of doubt. That somehow, it is impossible for us to believe that human knowledge is accurate. Diba? That human knowledge is specific or precise. The presence or absence of acceptable ethical behavior in tourism setting is very much a function of how tourists, operators, and local people act and feel about each other and towards the resource base. So, with or without ethics, I think people will be misguided. Diba? Kumbaga, walang guide, wala tayong pattern na susundan kung ano yung tama, kung ano yung mali. But then again, sinasabi natin dito that the behavior of the tourists, the behavior of the operators, the local people, the way they act, the way they feel, has something to do with ethics. It has something to do about the or towards the resource base. Ano ba yung resource base? E di yung ating environment. Diba? Let's say for example, how do you feel about tourists na laging nagkakalat? Bibili ng mga kung ano-anong fast food na pagkain, ayan. Tapos yung pinagkalatan is hindi malang itapon sa tamang basurahan. So how would you act or feel towards that incident? Ikaw as a local host, halimbawa, taga doon ka sa mismong lugar na yon, nakita mo maraming mga turista, nag-i-smoke sa mga hindi naman smoking area sa lugar. How would you feel about that? Babatasin mo ba sila? Kakausapin mo ba sila? Or pagsasabihan mo sila? Tatawag ka ba ng mga government officials or ng mga nasa higher authority para ipahuli? So, it's a matter of choices, diba? Kung ano yung gagawin natin, kung ano yung mafe-feel natin towards a particular situation. There is the feeling among researchers that a balance must be struck between the various stakeholders of the tourism industry in ensuring that the goodwill of some stakeholders, example are the tourists and local people, is not overridden by the misgivings of the other stakeholders, groups, and government or industry. So in order for us to manage effectively, or let's say conform with the proper ethical behavior, we must know how to balance everything. Lalong-lalo na a balance between the stakeholders and the industry. Sino-sino ba yung mga stakeholders na yan? So way back before, sa ating micro and macro perspective na class, sinasabi natin that the stakeholders, these are the party that has an interest in a company or in an organization. At itong mga parties na to, they can either affect, okay, or be affected sa nangyayari sa isang business. Pwedeng sila yung maapektuhan or pwede naman na sila yung makaapekto or sila yung makakontribute ng something positive or negative doon sa organization. Sino-sino yung mga stakeholders na to? These are the investors, diba? These are your employees, yung mga customers, yung mga guests, yung mga suppliers. Okay? So sila yung stakeholders. Sila yung may interest, okay? Sila yung pwedeng makaapekto or maapektuhan doon sa kinokonduct mo na business. Or kung ano man yung kinokonduct mo na mga actions or mga strategies in a particular area. Humankind therefore determines the form and function of nature within the human society. Conversely, the biocentric philosophy considers that all things in the biosphere have an equal right to exist. They are all equal in intrinsic value. So ano ba yung sinasabi natin na biocentric philosophy? Pag sinabi nating biocentric philosophy, or in other words, it is biocentrism, it is our ethical perspective. Ito yung pananaw natin na all life deserves a equal moral consideration or has equal moral standing. Lahat ng bagay na nabubuhay dito sa mundo is may karapatan. Okay? Meron silang karapatan with regards to the moral consideration and moral standing. They all have the equal right to exist. Wala tayong karapatan na sirain yung human nature na kahit halaman lang yan, kahit damo lang yan, kahit mga puno lang yan, diba, andun yung word na lang, they all have the right to exist because meron silang purpose, bakit sila nag-e-exist sa environment natin. Diba? Bakit kailangan natin magtanim ng mga puno? Ma'am, ano ba yung na-contribute niyan? Pinipitas lang naman ng mga tao yung bunga. Diba? Kung yan man is may bunga. It serves as one of the, kumbaga, sa superhero, diba? Sila yung isa sa mga sumasagip sa atin kapag may mga pagbabaha, diba? Kasi, ina-absorb nila yung tubig. And nowadays, dahil tayo is nasa urban setting na, diba? Nasa syudad tayo, wala na tayong masyadong makitang mga puno, o kaya naman kahit sa rural areas, andyan yung mga illegal loggings, yung pagpuputol ng puno, kaingin, and so on, na kumbaga, kinikitil natin or pinuputol natin yung buhay ng mga living organisms na yan. So, ang sinasabi dito sa biocentric philosophy or biocentrism is that all things have an equal right to exist. So, in the realm of parks and protected areas, Swinnerton in Philipson writes that resource managers and other decision makers around the world have taken competing views on the place of environmental management in parks. So, napag-usapan natin before that parks and protected areas should be preserved, should be conserved, and protected. Lahat sila. Because, sabi nga natin, itong mga parks and protected areas na to, isa to sa mga yaman ng isang bansa. Isa to sa mga lugar na pwede nating puntahan if we are stressed. Isa to sa mga lugar na pwede nating puntahan kapag tayo is may enough money na. And these places at itong mga lugar na to, i-accept nila tayo, tatanggapin nila tayo. At dapat tanggapin din natin na yung mga lugar na to is merong hangganan lang, di ba? Ibig sabihin, meron silang limitation. Hindi habang buhay, etong particular destination na to is nag-e-exist. Yes, mag-e-exist siya ng panghabang buhay, ng pangmatagalan, kung aalagaan natin, kung i-conserve natin yung environment, kung hindi natin sisirain. If we take a proper precautionary measures, if we practice sustainable tourism. It's the same thing with parks and protected areas. Kung gusto natin mag-picnic sa mga parks and protected areas na to, kung gusto natin to bisitahin, we have to be responsible. At yung pagiging responsible natin, it should start sa sarili natin, sa bahay natin, bago tayo lumabas. Kasi kung hindi tayo responsible enough sa sarili natin at sa bahay natin, kung palagi tayong makalat sa kwarto, palagi tayong makalat sa kung saan tayo pupunta, malamang, ganun din yung behavior mo, ganun din yung attitude mo or actions mo kapag bumisita ka sa mga particular destinations. So we have here the characteristics of resource protection and development. So sinasabi lang dito that there is a preservation, there is a conservation, and exploitation. So sa preservation and conservation, nahahati dyan yung resource protection. At between conservation and exploitation, nandun naman yung resource development. You are conserving a particular area, but there are also exploitations. May pagsira din. For example, view of resource. So sa preservation, it can be biocentric and anthropocentric. Ma'am, ano po yung anthropocentric? So when we say anthropocentric, it is the belief, okay? It is a belief that human beings are the most important entity in the universe. Sinasabi dito sa anthropocentric that human beings are in charge. Tayo yung in charge sa pangangalaga, sa pagprotekta, sa pag-conserve at pag-preserve ng ating environment. Hindi tayo yung in charge para sirain. Okay? So, sa conservation, it's the same thing, anthropocentric. Sa exploitation, anthropocentric din. We are taking care of the environment, pero tayo din naman yung sumisira sa environment. Next one is level of intervention. Ayan, no intervention, limited intervention, and unlimited intervention. Pag sinabi nating intervention, it has something to do with our involvement. Diba? Kapag sisirain na yung environment, napakaraming taong involved, di ba? Pag naman i-conserve, there are limited people lang na pwedeng mag-conserve ng environment, lalong-lalo na yung mga government officials, di ba? Yung mga in charge sa ating environment, measures of natural value, ayan, undisturbedness, naturalness, and completeness. Pag naman sa conservation, it has something to do with biodiversity, ayan, lahat ng mga living organisms, and rareness. Pagdating naman sa paggamit ng land, ayan, ano yung mga strategies na ginagamit kapag preservation? We normally use segregation. Ayan. Sa conservation naman is a combination, ayan, combination of other strategies, and sa exploitation, segregation, and combination. And access regulations, no use, responsible use, and very small numbers. Pagdating naman sa conservation, ayan, meron na tayong pagko-control sa sarili natin. There is a control, we are being responsible, and there are small numbers of people involved. Sa exploitation, unlimited use. Diba? Kapag sobrang dami ng beses natin na pinupuntahan yung isang lugar without even conserving or pinapangalagaan yon, diba? Naaabuso na natin. At bakit siya naaabuso? Because there are big numbers or yung tinatawag na mass tourism. Sobrang dami ng turista ang nagpupunta. That's why yung tourism area life cycle is very important, diba? From the introduction or development stage up to the decline stage. So doon natin makikita yung levels. Ayan. So, Philippine feels that the choices people make with respect to tourism reflect the importance of environmental values in their lives. So, if we choose, diba, or if we chose to not segregate our waste, maybe it has something to do with your values. Baka naman kasi talaga hindi mo mahal si Mother Nature, diba? Ngayon, kung ikaw yung klase ng tao na pag nag-travel, di ba? Pag nag-hiking, kapag nagpupunta sa beach, sa mga resorts, pag nagsa-sightseeing, is ikaw yung klase ng tao na pag may nakita kang kalat, pinupulot mo at tinatapon mo sa tamang basurahan, it reflects your values na talagang pinangangalagaan mo ang ating kapaligiran. So, the next one is Yuri. So, Yuri writes, the collective tourist gaze of the mass tourism phenomenon seems to be declining in the face of a more romantic gaze exemplified through green tourism. So, ano ba yung pagkakaiba ni collective gaze at saka ni romantic gaze? So, kindly take note of this. Kapag sinabi nating collective gaze, it has something to do sa mga travelers or turista na they are looking for events, they are looking for amusement facilities, at yung presence ng iba pang turista. That is collective gaze. Kapag naman romantic gaze, we are giving emphasis on solitude. Ayan. We are giving emphasis to privacy, personal, ayan, semi-spiritual relationship of the particular object or destination. And nowadays kasi, mas kino-convert na or mas gusto na ng tao yung romantic gaze. Mas gusto na nila yung pumupunta sa mga areas na may purpose. Like for example, 'di ba, yung tinatawag natin na pupunta tayo sa mga heritage sites, sa mga cultural sites. Kasi meron tayong matututunan. Hindi lang basta ang ganda ng location or ng destination. Meron pa siyang meaning. Nakakahanap tayo ng peace of mind, di ba? Nagiging personal sa atin yung pagta-travel natin. It has something to do with our inner being, di ba? It is more on a private kind of tour or travel. So, yun yung pagkakaiba ni collective tourist gaze at ni romantic tourist gaze. So, the research provided the foundation for the move to establish the International Institute for Quality and Ethics in Service and Tourism. So, itong foundation na to, it was designed to bridge the gap between ethics and issues that has something to do with community, sexual harassments, and rights of guests, and so on. So, itong International Institute for Quality and Ethics in Service and Tourism, so, meron silang mga programs, meron silang mga plans in order for them to manage yung mga issues na may kinalaman sa community. Particularly, di ba, sexual harassment. Hanggang ngayon, nag-i-exist pa rin yan. Kung ang prostitution is nag-i-exist pa rin sa ating community, same with sexual harassment. At yung mga karapatan ng mga guests natin, na mga turista kapag pumupunta sa isang lugar. So, lahat ng yun is nakapaloob dito or maidi-discuss dito sa foundation na ito. So, the link between the tourism industry and ethics has been discussed by Payne and Dimantis, who suggest that codes of ethics ought to project a number of key values, including the justice, integrity, competence, and utility. In illustrating that, okay, so ano daw yung mga values na to? Ano yung mga codes of ethics na dapat natin na tandaan? Number 1 is tourism industry must recognize that its basis is a limited resource. We have to recognize, we have to acknowledge that tourism industry is limited. The same with the environment, and that sustainable economic development requires limits to growth. It is limited. Hindi siya panghabang buhay. Sabi nga, di ba? Meron tayong mga natural resources, meron tayong mga let's say for example, resources na it takes time para sila is mag-grow ulit. O kaya naman, ito yung mga resources na they are being unseen o yung mga neutral stuff na tinatawag natin. So, tourism industry has a limited resources. Tourism industry must realize that it is community-based and that greater consideration must be given to the socio-cultural cause of tourism development. So, bakit siya sinabing community-based? Because we have to take into consideration na ang tourism has something to do with our community. Bakit? Pupunta ka sa isang destination, marami doon mga local people, marami doon ang mga, let's say, indigenous people, na they are belong to a particular community. At dapat, we have to respect it. When we go to a certain place, dahil limited yung mga resources, ayaw naman natin na magalit sa atin yung mga local people o yung mismong community doon na inaabuso natin yung mga resources na ito. Because it has something to do with the development of our tourism. And number 3, tourism industry must also recognize that it is a service-oriented and that it must treat employees as well as customers ethically. So above all, katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, the tourism industry is a service-oriented. We are giving services. We are providing services. And in that case, the employees should be treated well by the management, and the employees should treat the customers ethically and in a good manner. So, hindi porket mataas na yung position mo sa particular organization na to or sa particular destination na to, sa hotel na yan, is may karapatan ka na mata-matahin yung mga guests. May karapatan ka na pag si guest is mukhang hindi interesting, 'di ba? Nagkaroon ka na ng racial discrimination, hindi mo na siya i-entertain or hindi mo na siya i-assist. So, service-oriented means you are giving your 100%, the highest quality service that you can give to your customers, to your guests, to the tourists. Because in return, hindi lang naman yung tourist ang magbe-benefit, kundi yung mismong business din, and at the same time, yung environment, mas makakatulong ka sa environment if you are practicing yung sustainable tourism. So those are the key values that has something to do with the codes of ethics. So GENOT further underscores the practical reasons for industry to associate itself with codes of conduct, stating that among other factors, a sound environment means good business, meeting consumer demand, unifying industry efforts and image, and assuring product quality. So dito sinasabi natin or ine-emphasize natin yung tinatawag na sound environment. When we say sound environment, it has something to do with managing your business, but at the same time, you meet the consumer demands, kung ano man yung gusto ng, or kung ano man yung demand ng society ngayon, ng mga turista ngayon, and there is a coordination of efforts, and assuring that yung mga products and services na binibigay mo is of high quality. So, Janet feels that the following principles are at the core of any code of ethics. So, ano yung mga principles na to? Environmental commitment. So, ano ba ibig sabihin ng environmental commitment? From the word itself, commitment, committed. So, it is the individual's pursuit of environmental sustainability. Yung willingness, okay? Your willingness to sacrifice your personal enjoyment to reduce waste. Sometimes kasi, gustong-gusto natin mag-travel. Pero pag pupunta na tayo sa isang location, hindi naman natin maiwasan magkalat. Hindi naman natin maiwasan na hindi itapon, or let's say, hindi natin maiwasan na i-preserve yung particular area, i-conserve. Hindi natin maiwasan na magkakalat tayo, tapos at the end of the day, hindi naman natin maitatapon sa tamang basurahan. So dito sinasabi sa environmental commitment, it has something to do with your willingness, 'di ba? If you are committed sa isang bagay, it means you are willing. You are willing to exert your 100% effort para lang alagaan itong bagay na to o itong tao na to. So it's the same thing with environment. Kahit simpleng bagay yan, kahit yung simpleng pagtapo ng basura, simpleng pagsasegregate, 'di ba? Simpleng pag-keep ng mga pinagbalatan ng candy at hindi mo itapon sa tricycle o sa highway, 'di ba? Yun is environmental commitment na. Sabi nga natin, your simple steps or your small actions has a greater or has a big impact. Next one is responsibility. Of course, you have to be responsible. You have to take note of your responsibilities, your duties towards the environment. Integrated planning. It has something to do with the government, sa mga people in charge, sa pangangalaga, sa pag-conserve at pag-preserve ng environment, kung ano man yung mga nabuo nilang plano. And environmentally sound management. So when we say sound management, it means you are taking all the practicable steps to ensure that the overall management, yung kabuuan ng management nyo, takes place in such a manner that protects human health and environment. So sa environmentally sound management, you are taking care, you are protecting human health and the environment. 'Di ba? You are protecting the environment sa kaingin. 'Di ba? Sa pagsusunog ng mga kung ano-ano, you are taking the environment or taking care of the environment against illegal logging. Because it has something to do with our health. 'Di ba? Kapag wala na tayong malasap na fresh air dyan at puro air pollution na lang ang nalalanghap natin, 'di ba? So sino yung magsasuffer? Tayo at yung mga future generations. So, protecting the human health and environment against adverse effect of activities. 'Di ba? Yung mga processes, mga products, and substances. So, next one is cooperation between decision makers. Ayan. So, sino ba yung mga decision makers na yan? So, yun yung mga nasa higher authority o yung may mga power within the community, within a particular country or region. And of course, public awareness. Ito ang pinaka-importante din. We have to be aware. There should be an awareness sa lahat na nangyayari sa paligid natin. Para nang sa ganon, maging sensitive tayo sa nangyayari. So nowadays, diba, may pandemic na. Dadagdagan mo pa ba ng mga environmental issues kung yung mismong pandemic is hindi na nga natin masolusyonan? So the same goes with other factors. So those are the principles that has something to do also with the core of Code of Ethics na pinublish or sinulat ni Junot. So next one is deontology or deontology. So ito is na-discuss na natin kanina. So when we say deontology, it is an ethical approach which suggests that an act is right or wrong on the basis of rules or principles of action or duties, or rights or virtues. So this approach advocates behavior that is means-based or intention-based in its orientation. So katulad ng nabanggit natin kanina, that deontological ethics has something to do with tama ba tong ginagawa ko? Is the actions right or wrong? Diba? Tama ba tong mga actions na ginagawa ko? So example niyan is, for example, tour operators will abide organizational policies developed for the purpose of honoring established environmental or cultural norms. Yung mga tour operators, yung mga tour guides na yan, di ba? Sinusunod nila yung mga policy within the area because they are honoring, they are giving respect doon sa environment at doon sa host community o kaya naman sa culture na kinalakihan or sa culture na isinasabuhay ng particular community. Tourism is not a generic industry since it is uniquely impacts on the environment, society, and cultural system in ways which require a holistic orientation within a broad and multidimensional context. So sinasabi dyan that tourism is not a generic industry. Ano ba pag sinabi nating generic? Parang sa mga gamot, diba? It is common. When we say generic, it is general. Diba? But no, tourism is not a generic industry. Kung baga sa gamot, it is branded. Why? Because it is specific. Ang tourism is a specific part of the industry. Now wherein it is exclusive. Saan ma'am siya exclusive? It is exclusive for tourists and the stakeholders. Diba? It is exclusive for the host community. At yung sinasabi dyan na since it is not generic industry, it requires a holistic orientation. What do you mean by holistic? It is considered as a whole. Kabuuan. Diba? Hindi lang sa isang area ka magfo-focus, kundi sa buong industriya. Regardless kung yaan man is merong negative impact, positive impact, diba? So, sinasabi pa dyan that we should focus on the organization and its customer. Diba? Kasi, yung mga customers na to, yung organization na to, meron niyang effect, meron niyang impact na nagagawa. And pati yung mga third parties. Ano yung mga third parties? Ito yung mga external issues na normally ini-ignore natin pero merong effect. For example, di ba? Conduct tayo ng mga kung anong-anong activity doon sa particular destination. Promote tayo ng promote. But do you think your promotion will last? Do you think itong promotion or marketing strategy na ginagawa mo is pwede pa kapag tag-ulan na? Kapag bumabagyo na? Is it season-oriented? So we have to think, or we have to make sure that we don't take it as something na parang part lang ng industry. Diba? yes, part siya ng industry, pero it has a unique contribution sa ating industriya. Kaya rin ang isang bansa is nagiging stable because yung tourism industry is stable din. And now, dahil sa pandemic, unti-unti nating binubuksan lahat ng mga turismo sa bansa at basta i-practice lang din yung safety precaution na tinatawag. So, hindi pa rin talaga mawawala. Yes, we can enjoy for the meantime, but we have to make sure that while we are enjoying, we are also practicing yung mga safety precaution para hindi na tayo dumagdag sa libo-libo or milyong-milyong tao na merong COVID-19. So the next one is existentialism. So implies that an act is right or wrong according to the actor's free will, responsibility, and authenticity. So dito sa existentialism, it has something to do with you are being aware, sabi nga dyan, you are self-aware, and you are taking full responsibility of your actions. So kung makikita nyo sa picture, do you believe that you exist because of destiny or by choice? So it is by choice. You are here in this world because you have a purpose. You have a choice na gumawa ng tama. You have a choice kung gagawa ka ng mali kahit alam mo na mali yun. Okay? So in here we have a model of ethical triangulation. So ito lang yung summarization ng mga sinabi natin kanina. So sa deontology, andyan yung right behavior follows the universal principles duty, cultural and ecological norms, and the law. Sa existentialism naman, you are self-determined, you have a freedom of choice, ayan, you are responsible for your action. Sa teleology, you have to develop virtues, ayan, greatest good for the greatest number, greatest good for the individual. So those are the model of ethical triangulation. The next one is the moral development in ecotourism. Ayan, so we have artifacts, we have patterns of individual behavior, we have values and beliefs, and basic assumption of ecotourism. So makikita nyo dyan, we have the market culture, we have the social bureaucratic culture, and the principled culture. So of course, sa market culture, involved talaga dyan yung pera. Diba? Yung trading, yung capitalism. When we say naman sa social bureaucratic, we have the utilitarian, and pagdating sa principled is yung ecological. So that concludes our lesson in ecotourism, which is the role of ethics in ecotourism. So I hope you learned something from this lesson. If you missed some important points, feel free to replay the video or watch the video again. So thank you so much for listening, and further elaboration of this topic will be discussed during our virtual class. So thank you so much and have a nice day.